It's no secret that Bakugan right now is in a pretty tough spot. After the ending of Gen 2, Spin Master quickly decided to try and make a third generation, and it went horribly wrong. Not even a year into the gen, it was already dead. And ever since then, Bakugan has been on pause. A lot of people have wondered about a fourth gen, especially with a movie apparently happening, so we'll see how that goes, or if it actually comes to fruition, but regardless, a lot of people are wondering about a new gen, when is Bakugan coming back. So in the meantime, I decided I would try to make a concept for a fourth gen. Mind you, I don't think this would actually happen. Looking at Gen 3's game design, I don't really have a ton of hope for Bakugan to actually have a good game, but I just thought it'd be fun to sit down and have a discussion on this game concept that I came up with because why not? One thing to note is that this is heavily inspired by Bakutech. I've talked about it before, but I feel like Bakutech was the absolute best Bakugan ever was gameplay-wise. So I'm going to be using that as a basis for this game. And mind you, this is just a blueprint. If there's some kind of weird niche rule, you could probably assume that Bakutech's rule set would have it covered. And also, I'm not going to get into like specific abilities or anything. Maybe if people are interested, I can make like a hypothetical wave 1 with new abilities or whatever else, but for now, this is just the basic blueprint of sort of the rules and setup. So that said, what would you need to play? So in this hypothetical gen, you would still have 3 Bakugan, as always. You would actually have 5 gate cards, which is a bit different than normal. And yes, there is a reason why one is different than the others, we'll get to that later. You'd also need 3 ability cards, however these are not normal ability cards. Again, I'll talk about that later. And this is everything you need to play. However, there would be a couple options here. First up, you could use a support piece. And depending on the type of support piece, it may also have a reference card. So yeah, there will be some of the weird oddities of Gen 1 in there, the kind of awkward extra stuff, but as long as it's kept to a reasonable limit, I don't see why this can't be the case. In fact, I think Bakugan actually has a ton of potential for support pieces, they just weren't always utilized the best. Again, this and this are completely optional, but the rest is required to play. Next, how would you set up the field? So to set up the field, you would take 4 of your gate cards, removing this kind of special one here. And then if we assume this is like the center of the field here, you would then put your cards like this on your left side. And then 2 other cards going here and also here. So that is your side of the field. And then of course your opponent does the same thing on their side, which will look like this. So this is the basic field setup for this hypothetical Gen 4. It's based on Bakutech Gachi's field setup, however, instead of just having 1 card on either side, you now just have 2, and there you go, there's 8 cards. Obviously, this makes sense with having more gate cards. Now to quickly go over some of the battling technicalities here, first up, both players would roll at the exact same time, as we saw in Bakutech Gachi and also like Gens 2 and 3 of Bakugan. Unlike Gachi though, there's no kind of time limit or anything like that, and despite how much I like Bakutech, I think that's one thing that I just don't really like is the time limit. You have to quickly fold up your Bakugan and get ready to roll. So that's not here, although in official play or something, once both players are ready, maybe you could have like a quick 3-second timer just to make sure both players go at the exact same time, but again, that's not required. Also, there's no used or unused pile for your 3 Bakugan. If they are not on the field, they are in your hand, meaning they are in play. There's no rotation of them or anything like that, you just play whatever you have available to play, and that's how that goes. As for support pieces, once they've served their purpose, whether it is a one-use thing or whatever requirements to get them off the field are met, they are simply discarded, they are done for the entire game. So I think that covers the basic field and general setup, so let's go and move on to the actual Bakugan, as I have some ideas to how the Bakugan would actually be constructed here. So first up, these Bakugan would be made to be high performance like Bakutech. They're meant to be physical game pieces, not just a means to get to a card battle. I think Bakutech had it right with making it more physicality, not in Gen 3's way, just actually using the concept and design of Bakugan to make a genuinely unique game. That was the right approach. So that is kept here. Also for the Bakugan themselves, the power system name doesn't matter, but I would suggest just going back to G-Power, and for this video, I will just be referring to it as G-Power. And for the attributes, I would just go back to the original 6 attributes. Also, I think it'd be best if each individual Bakugan was tied to an attribute, like in Bakutech, where most Bakugan would not be printed in multiple attributes. I think this makes building archetypes a bit more interesting. Yes, you can mix attributes in your deck, but it gives a bit more structure to the overall game. Although, unlike Bakutech, you could always just have some basic kind of standard, not really unique Bakugan that could be printed in all attributes that could just be acting as sort of filler Bakugan, but could be good to get started with, and would help with accessibility if you were to buy some kind of starter deck. As for the Bakugan themselves, I would actually have 2 systems to start with. Obviously, this is a concept to start a gen, so future developments of these, or potential third systems and beyond, are not accounted for here. These are just the basic 2 to start with, which are the Alchemy System and the Core System. The Alchemy System is just kind of the bind system. These Bakugan would just split in half from the back, as the bind system does. That's all there is to it. And the back halves would also contain abilities. So with this, I'm actually taking some notes from Bakugan armors here, and that's what the ability cards are actually for. Ability cards are not cards that you use once in a battle and are independent of everything else. They are tied to your specific Bakugan. It's literally skill arms from Bakugan armors. However, they have cards because I feel like not having cards was not the best move. It's good to have reminder text so you know what your abilities do. Also, that can allow them to be a bit more complicated and interesting. So your ability cards are directly tied to your actual Bakugan. Again, referencing Bakugan armors. And yes, in the Alchemy System, all abilities are tied specifically to the back halves of these Bakugan. Also, the Alchemy System could have plate pieces. They'd probably be a bit less common here than in the Core System, but plate pieces would still be possible to use here. What are plate pieces? We'll get to that in a minute. The other system is the Core System. Core System Bakugan simply do not split in half, but that does mean that these Bakugan can get a bit crazier. As an example here, something like Bury Beyond from Bakutech, which would be impossible in the bind system, which would translate exactly to the Alchemy System, so yes, the Core System would have its uses. These Bakugan would also have abilities tied to them, but it's tied to the entire Bakugan, obviously, they don't split. And these could also accommodate core pieces probably a bit easier as well. What are plate pieces though? Basically, they're cross pieces from Bakutech. Of course, the shape would be a bit different. I'd probably also make them a little bit smaller as well, but the basic idea is they are cross pieces from Bakutech, which are just these kind of general shapes that can kind of go on anything. Shieldlandos here has 3 of them. They can be swapped out, and I would have plastic, rubber, and metal. Also, rubber would not just be tied to one Bakugan like it was in Bakutech. It would be a more important aspect of plate pieces, equal to things like plastic and metal. And unlike Bakutech, there wouldn't be a convert system equivalent. Plate pieces could be used on literally any system. Some Bakugan just might not have them though, but others can, and it's independent of the system that the Bakugan's actually in. So I think that takes care of Bakugan. Let's talk about the cards. One thing to note is I think it'd be really nice if every card had a small QR code on it. This could immediately send you to this hypothetical Bakugan Gen 4 site, which would give you an index of every card and would have a bunch of translations. Using the QR code would just take you to the exact card and you could see all the translations. This would just be a great accessibility option. I think that'd be very, very nice to have. As far as ability cards go, I've already talked about them. You have 3, they correspond to your 3 Bakugan, and are applicable whenever. If it is a general ability that just applies to the Bakugan at all times, then the ability card is always in play. While it's not planned, if you did have some kind of a really strong ability that is specifically said to be a one-use thing, then it's one use. But aside from that, these are meant to be omnipresent. Now let's talk about gate cards. As I mentioned, there are 4 regular gate cards, and you have to have 1 of each type. These are gold, silver, copper, and platinum. Gold are the most standard cards. They have decent bonuses, although the G-Power bonuses can be negative, so be mindful of that. And they can have text, but the text is generally not as strong, and a lot of times can even be tied to specific Bakugan. Silver cards would just have no text. These are fully focused on G-Power bonuses. Copper cards are sort of the opposite. They would still have bonuses, but would be much smaller. Instead, they are very, very heavy on text and having unique effects. Next up are Platinum cards. Platinum cards are weird as these are neutral or negative cards. Basically, they can be trap cards. They're focused on having a lot of negative bonuses, or text that is negative. This is probably where I put low G win cards, and also for neutral cards where you have no text, no bonuses, it's just nothing. These would be platinum cards. These are sort of the weird cards that give you weird setups. So with those 4 out of the way, what about the 5th one? So the 5th gate card is known as a diamond gate card. Diamond gate cards are required in your deck, but they are not placed normally on the field at the start of a game, instead being used at some point later. Though you can use them at the start, they can just be used at any time. So before you roll, you're allowed to put these out there. Again, it can be at the start of the game, it could be later in the game, just sometime before you roll, place on the field. To give a proper look at this, basically you have to put it on one of 4 adjacent sides of a gate card. So this would be the actual end of the field right here, and at the start of a game, these are completely taken up, but you can put it on either side of one of these 2, and then for these kind of end cards you can go either on the outer side or on the end side this way. So if I were to use my diamond card at the start of a game, I might want to put it like right here or something. Once in play, it's worth noting, diamond gate cards are not used for G-Power battles at all here. Well, at least in normal gameplay, but we'll get to that much later. The idea here is once it's on the field, you can now land one of your Bakugan on this card. Once it's there, you simply take your Bakugan back, as well as a card. This card now becomes a very powerful ability card, actually, and it would stay in your hand for the rest of the game. Basically, you have to sacrifice one of your turns, which gives your opponent time to do whatever they want, in order to grab this card, but it is powerful. The exact effects could range. For example, you could have an absolutely ridiculously strong effect, however, it might be tied to one specific Bakugan, meaning that only one of the 3 Bakugan in your deck can actually get it, or else it's void, and also might be a one-time use ability, so once it's there, you have a ridiculously strong power, but it was hard to get and it's one-time use. On the opposite end, you could have a diamond gate card that is able to be grabbed by any of your 3 Bakugan, and the effect stays for the rest of the regular game. The effect itself would likely be much weaker in this case, but having an omnipresent effect like this could still be very powerful. Now what happens if your opponent lands on your diamond gate card? Again, these aren't used for G-Power battles, you're supposed to capture them. In that case, it's discarded. You lose your diamond gate card because your opponent got there instead of you. Now if both you and your opponent land on the diamond gate card, then both Bakugan are sent back to their respective players' hands as normal, and the user would get the diamond gate card. As these are very powerful, effectively the ruling here is tie goes to the runner, so you get to use your card. I thought of a lot of different ways to incorporate diamond gate cards into the game. At one point I even had this concept of having plastic pieces to put them vertically on the side of the field, which was interesting, but it felt way too gimmicky to actually go forward with. The reason I did it like this is because you can actually get some insane mind games going. For example, not all decks are going to be overly reliant on these cards. For some, it might just be a nice bonus, but they aren't really built around them. In that case, you could almost use them as a bait. For example, you could play your card and put it on the opposite side of the field and just leave it there. The goal could be to get your opponent to try and sacrifice one of their turns to get rid of your card while you set up for something else. Alternatively, again, you could play mind games. Maybe you actually do want this card, but you want your opponent to think that you don't. So they expect you to do one thing, but you don't do it and instead go for the card. There's a lot of mind games that can be played with this, which I think would be really fun. And even if you aren't using the bonus or even caring that much about the bonus, there's a lot of play to be had with these just psychologically. And with that, I think we've covered gate cards. Now we have to talk about BakuMines. So you could have up to one of these, but again, they are not a requirement. During gameplay, you could choose to substitute out one of your Bakugan to roll your BakuMine into play. If you miss, you get it back, but once it stands, it stands. Also, there are 2 different types of BakuMines, BakuMine Alphas and BakuMine Betas. What's the difference? So BakuMine Alphas are activated once an opponent were to roll into specific spots on the BakuMine. Though I'd want them to be a bit more circular and have parts that sort of spring out, not just always there and completely screw up the actual design of the BakuMine, but I don't think having properly round pieces is too much to ask for. Anyway, BakuMine Alphas are the type of BakuMine that actually come with a reference card. These could have either G-Power subtractions, or some kind of negative effects, or even both. Once activated, the BakuMine is actually removed from the field, however, the reference card is then given to the opponent. It is now their problem. Whatever effects are on that card now are tied to the Bakugan that activated the BakuMine, so that Bakugan is now nerfed. In order to get rid of the reference card, they have to be involved with a 1 gate card. What do I mean by that? Basically, if this Bakugan could get a critical KO, or it even just gets critical KO'd, it's part of a double stand, or it is involved in a G-Power battle regardless of whether or not it wins, the reference card is then taken away. They just have to be involved in the winning of a gate card regardless of if they actually win or not. Now there are other ways to handle these things. Basically, if you could knock a BakuMine Alpha off of the card without it activating, then it's just discarded. Also, if the BakuMine is on a card, has not been activated, and that card gets won, regardless of who wins it, it is also discarded. Oh, and if the user of the card accidentally activates their own BakuMine, then they don't get the effect, it is simply just discarded yet again. Now let's talk about BakuMine Betas. BakuMine Betas are meant to be more physical based. So when someone rolls into the BakuMine, they have some kind of stronger defensive property. Alternatively, some of these could just be instantly activated once they land. They're just large and bulky and take up space. However, the stronger ones would require activation, so a decent blockade is instantly activated, a good blockade has to be activated by something else. But yeah, that's the general idea. These are meant to lock down cards. Perhaps something like Bury Beyond could serve as a good example, or even Jaiba. I'm not saying you can have Bakugan like this, but potentially you could have a Bakugan with multiple rubber bands sticking out to really lock down a card, or maybe something that comes out with multiple secondary magnets like Jaiba has here, maybe 4 of them, and it just plants itself on a card and makes that card much harder to actually land on. So alphas have special effects, betas are blockades. Also for BakuMine Betas, they can be discarded. If they're knocked off of a card, regardless of what state they're in, they're discarded, as they're meant to be blockades, so them being gone defeats their purpose. And also if they're involved in a 1 gate card, like alphas, they're discarded. Although unlike BakuMine Alphas, the user is allowed to activate their own BakuMine Beta. Though landing properly after this could be a bit difficult, so you may have to give up a turn in order to do this properly, but if you're skilled enough, it could still be possible to land after you do this. And with that, I think we've properly covered BakuMines and both of their iterations. Again, you don't have to use this if you don't want to, but they are support pieces that you can sub in as, well, support pieces. And I think having a physical base support piece would actually be really interesting. And now we have the last main segment of the video. How do you actually win cards? I've already alluded to certain things, but let's just go ahead and get into this. So the most obvious one would be having a G-Power battle. You and your opponent are on the same card, and after accounting for your own G-Power, potential abilities, gate card stuff, someone has the highest G-Power and whoever does wins that card. So both people will take their Bakugan back, and the winner takes their card. This is very important. The card goes into a prize pile of sorts, and this prize pile is important to keep track of, because if you win a G-Power battle, this gate card is to be placed face down in your prize pile. Keep that in mind. The next way to win a card is via a critical KO. So to explain the difference between a KO and a critical KO, this is the same as Bakugan's ruling. A KO means that you knock your opponent's Bakugan off the card, but your Bakugan also does not stand on the card. In that case, both players just take their Bakugan back, that's it. But in the case of a critical KO, their Bakugan is knocked off of the card while yours stands on a card. If that happens, you just win the gate card, and that's that. Unlike other winning methods though, this is to be placed face up in your prize pile. Again, keep this in mind that critical KOs allow you to place gate cards face up in your prize pile. This actually does have a reason. The next way to win a card is via a double stand. Stand 2 of your own Bakugan on the same gate card. If you do this uncontested, you win the card. However, if your opponent stands the Bakugan as you stand your second Bakugan, then you have to choose which of your 2 Bakugans stay on the card. To do a G-Power battle, the other one is returned to your hand, but yes, if they're uncontested and it's just your 2 Bakugan on the card, well, then you win that gate card, and it will be placed face down in your prize pile. Now, there is a 4th way to win cards, but this is sort of taking a really old rule and It's something that kind of just exists as a safety net, basically. So if you have all 3 of your Bakugan on the field at the same time, you're out of Bakugan, and it's time to roll, then you get to call stay on one of them. So say I want to call stay on this Rise Dragon here. If your opponent fails to actually do anything on the next turn, start a G-Power battle with it, crit KO it, or even just KO it, then yeah, you just win that gate card. It puts your opponent in a tough spot if you land all 3. They can technically crit KO you though, or win, but if they don't start anything, then yeah, you win the gate card. And this gate card will be placed face down in your prize pile. Also, in case you're wondering, what happens if both players have all their Bakugan on the field at the same time, no one has anything? Well, in that case, you just call a reset, everyone takes back all of their Bakugan, and each player just has all 3 of their Bakugan back, that's all. So that's how you win gate cards, but how many gate cards do you need to actually win? 5. You have to win 5 gate cards in order to actually win the game. Now, there are 8 gate cards on the field, meaning that it is possible to actually tie, as both players could technically just have 4 gate cards, 1 each. If that happens, there are 2 steps to figuring this out, and the first has to do with the position of the cards in your prize pile. So let's just say this is your prize pile, this is your opponent's prize pile. You win, as your opponent did not get a single crit KO, but you got 1. That is a buff that I gave to critical KOs. I had a lot of ideas on how to fix critical KOs, as I wanted them to feel a lot stronger, and because tying 4 to 4 is very possible, I figured it could be interesting to give crit KOs a buff, specifically as a tiebreaker mechanic. Whoever has more crit KOs in a tie wins. Plus it also just makes full-on ties a lot harder to have, as the odds of 2 players having the exact same amount of cards and crit KOs is at least less likely. It is certainly possible though, which gets us to the next step. What if the players have the same of everything? If this happens, a deathmatch begins. Again, this is rare enough to not be a constant thing, but it's still possible enough to actually warrant some kind of unique setup. If we had organized play for something like this, I think it'd be really, really hype to have a deathmatch in like a tournament setting. That'd be really cool, but what is a deathmatch? In a deathmatch, each player has to use their diamond gate card as an actual gate card. If you have your diamond effect, it is removed. If you didn't use it because it was something that needed to be used, it's now gone. Diamond effects are off the table. And you now use them as gate cards, and because they're not really gate cards, you don't get any effects or bonuses in a deathmatch. As far as the field setup goes though, well, it looks like this. You place your card further from yourself, so your opponent's is closer to you. It is a classic Bakugan layout. 1 card per person. Now, in a deathmatch, like I said, diamond gate cards and any gate card effects at all are gone. Also, all BakuMines are off the table. You cannot use any support pieces in a deathmatch. So it's just the physical attributes of your own Bakugan, their G-Power, and their built-in ability via their ability cards. That's it. And some of these abilities might not even work if they're gate card based, so when constructing a deck, it could be important to actually take into account how they perform in a deathmatch, just in case it comes down to that. Certain Bakugan might be great normally, but in a deathmatch might not be as good, where others could still be good normally, but might actually just excel in a deathmatch. During this time, the first to score a win through any means wins. Obviously, the stay win condition doesn't really apply here, so if you win a G-Power battle, get a crit KO, or get a double stand, you win the game, and that's it. I think this could be a pretty fun way to have some kind of unique tying mechanic that would also just be a lot of fun, and again, if this had actual support, would be really hype in some kind of tournament setting. But now that I've covered deathmatches, that's pretty much everything for this concept. I'm aware that making a Gen 4 concept is probably meaningless. I don't think Spin Master is going to care very much, and also, because of how this is set up, this isn't really something you could just replicate at home like other fan creations, so why did I make this? I have no idea. I just simply felt like it and thought it'd be interesting for discussion. But if somehow this actually pops off and people take note of it, then yeah, Spin Master, feel free to take anything from here. Go for it. But with that said, that is my basic concept for a Bakugan Gen 4. If nothing else, I hope it was at least interesting to hear about and hear just how someone else will make a Bakugan game that isn't Spin Master, so let me know what you thought if you did have any specific thoughts on this. Again, if people take note of it, I guess I could maybe try to come up with sort of a Wave 1 where I actually make proper abilities, proper cards. That would probably take quite a while though, but I don't know, maybe it could be interesting. That said, that's all for this video, so thanks for watching, and bye-bye.